The rain came down on Ravalli County the way grief comes down on a man who thought he was done with it. Hard, slanted, relentless. By the time the storm reached Stevensville just after 9 in the evening, the dirt roads climbing into the Bitterroot foothills had turned to rivers of brown mud, and every ponderosa pine along Pinecrest Ridge was bowing under the weight of the wind. Out here 15 miles from the nearest paved shoulder, the nearest neighbor was half a mile down the road, and on a night like this, half a mile might as well have been 50. Inside the little white farmhouse at the end of 4,242 Pinecrest, a 15-year-old girl was about to learn that a single wrong digit can rewrite the map of the whole world. Her name was Wren Ashford. She was small for her age, all sharp elbows and watchful eyes with pale brown hair she kept tucked behind her ears, and a quiet way of moving through a room that made teachers forget she was there. That was a mistake they only made once, because Wren Ashford had a mind like a steel trap wrapped around a calculator. 2 months ago, she had stood on a stage in Helena and accepted the gold medal for the Montana State High School Math Olympiad, solving a 12-step proof with 3 minutes still on the clock. She remembered license plates. She remembered phone numbers she had dialed exactly once. She remembered the page numbers of every page her father had dog-eared in his old battered copy of Lonesome Dove before the cancer took him 2 years and 3 months and 11 days ago. On this particular Thursday night in April, Wren was in the kitchen pouring herself a glass of water from the tap when the power went out. It didn't flicker. It didn't stutter. It simply surrendered. One moment the overhead light was humming above her. The next the house was plunged into a blackness so complete it felt like the dark had teeth. She stood very still. She could hear the rain hammering the tin roof. She could hear the old refrigerator ticking down towards silence. She could hear her own heartbeat suddenly loud, suddenly fast. And then she heard the sound that did not belong. It came from the mudroom at the back of the house. A single sharp, deliberate crash of shattering glass. Not a branch, not the wind. The deliberate sound of something being broken from the outside by a hand that knew exactly how to break it. Wren's fingers opened. The glass slipped out of her grip. It fell to the rug and did not shatter. Just rolled in a slow half circle, spilling water into the weave. She did not scream. She did not run for the phone. Something ancient in her, something older than fear, older than thought, clamped her mouth shut and made her body do what bodies have always done when the wolf comes to the door. It made her hide. She crossed the living room in her socks, moving fast and silent along the edge of the wall where the floorboards did not creak. She took the stairs 3 at a time. She reached her bedroom at the end of the second-floor hallway. She did not turn on a flashlight. She did not close the door loudly. She slipped into her closet, pulled the folding, slatted doors shut behind her, and buried herself under the pile of her mother's old winter coats, the ones that still smelled faintly of pine smoke, and the cedar chips her father used to scatter in the boot box. Downstairs, the heavy tread of work boots began to cross the kitchen linoleum. Nora. The voice was male. It was slurred at the edges like a man speaking through a mouthful of wet cotton. But underneath the slur, there was something cold and sober and patient, and that was the part that turned Wren's blood to ice water. "Nora, honey, I know this house. I've been out here. I know you got a girl." Wren stopped breathing. She recognized the voice. Dallas Reeve. Local drifter, local drunk, local cautionary tale. He had come to the property twice in the last year. The first time hammering on the front door at midnight asking for money. The second time standing at the edge of the driveway shouting her mother's name until Sheriff Pritchard's deputies drove him off. Her mother had filed for a restraining order the next morning. Dallas Reeve had responded by telling a bartender in Hamilton that one day he was going to take something from Nora Ashford that she could not get back. "Nora," he called, again closer now. The boots were on the staircase. "Send the girl down, sweetheart. Send her down and maybe you and me can still talk this out." Wren's mother was not home. Nora Ashford was working a double shift at Ravalli Regional Medical Center 40 minutes away through the storm. She was not coming home until 6 in the morning. Wren's brother Corbin was stationed at the reserve base over in Missoula, 90 minutes away, on a good night 3 hours away tonight. There was no one in the house but her. And Dallas Reeve already knew it. That last sentence was the one that broke something open inside her. He had not come for her mother, he had come for her. In the closet with her knees pulled up against her chest and her mother's wool coat pressed against her face, Ren Ashford slid her hand into the pocket of her sweatpants and took out her phone. The screen lit up like a lantern in a cave. She dimmed it all the way down. She opened her messages. She typed with fingers that shook so badly she had to start over twice. Corbin, he broke in. He's downstairs. I'm in the closet, please help me. She dialed his number from memory, 555-0197. She hit send. The message sat on her screen. Delivered. And then nothing. No reply. No three little dots. Nothing. She did not know it yet, but 90 miles away in a barracks day room on the Missoula Reserve Base, Corbin Ashford's phone had died at 8:47 p.m. and was sitting at the bottom of his gear bag, black and silent, while Corbin himself slept through the storm with the deep, dreamless sleep of a 19-year-old who had just finished a 14-hour field exercise. Down below, Dallas Reeve was tearing apart the living room. Ren heard the sofa go over. She heard the framed photograph of her father, the one from his last 4th of July, come off the wall and shatter. She heard Reeve laugh a loose, wet laugh and mutter something she could not make out. She looked at her phone. 37% battery. No reply from Corbin. And then Ren Ashford did something that a panicked child would not have done. She did something that a girl with a mind like a steel trap wrapped around a calculator does. She thought. Corbin's number ended in 7. She had typed it correctly. She had seen the delivered receipt. So the message had reached a phone. Whether that phone was his or someone else's, the message had landed somewhere. If Corbin was not answering, it meant his phone was off or dead or in a locker. Either way, he was not coming, not in time. But she had other options. She had her Aunt Miriam's number memorized. She had Sheriff Pritchard's direct line memorized from the business card on the fridge. She had the number of the old neighbor, Mr. Halloran, down the road. She tried them in order. Aunt Miriam, no answer. Pritchard's dispatch, busy signal from the storm overload. Halloran, the call dropped after one ring, probably a tower down. 32%. She looked at Corbin's number on her screen. 5550197. She stared at the 7, and then Ren did something she would later think of in the long, slow months of aftermath as the single most important decision of her young life. She began typing variations. She reasoned it the way she reasoned a math problem. Corbin's carrier Verizon used a block of numbers assigned to this part of western Montana. Numbers close to his were statistically likely to belong to people within 50 miles. The storm had already knocked out service to some towers. If she seeded her text across a small fan of adjacent numbers, she multiplied her odds. One of those phones would belong to a stranger, maybe a kind one, maybe one close enough to help. She changed the last digit to 8. She typed, "Please, this is not a joke. My name is Ren. I am 15 years old. A man broke into my house at 4242 Pinecrest Road in Stevensville, Montana. He has a crowbar. I am hiding. Please call 911. She hit send. She changed it to 6. Send. She changed it to 5. Send. She changed the second to last digit. 9 to 8. Send. 9 to 7. Send. She sent the message to 6 different numbers in under 90 seconds. Her thumbs were cramping. Her phone battery had dropped 4 more percent from the screen brightness spikes. Downstairs, Dallas Reeve was at the bottom of the staircase. Ren. He sang her name. He sang it like a lullaby. Ren, honey, I know your name. Your mama used to tell me about you. Come on down, and I'll tell you all about your mama, all the things she never told you. 30 miles away on Highway 93, just outside Corvallis, the neon sign of the Iron Mountain Saloon was glowing a steady red through the slanting rain. The Iron Mountain was a squat cinder-block building with black-painted windows and a parking lot full of Harley-Davidsons arranged in a perfect militant row. It was the clubhouse of the Iron Mountain Charter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, and on any given Thursday night, it was exactly as busy as it wanted to be, which was to say quietly. Inside the jukebox was playing Merle Haggard Turned Down Low. The pool table was occupied by 2 men playing a slow, considered game of 8-ball. The air smelled of leather, coffee, wood smoke from the old potbelly stove in the corner, and the faintest trace of the cigar that Cormac Grizzly Vance was permitting himself on a Thursday. Grizzly was the sergeant-at-arms of the charter. He was 52 years old, built like a side of beef that had opinions, and he had a beard the color of iron and snow. He was winning the pool game without particularly trying. At the far end of the bar, nursing his third cup of black coffee of the evening, sat a man named Silas Holloway. Nobody had called him Silas in 20 years. To the club, to the few friends he had outside it, to the bartender who slid him a fresh cup without being asked, he was Drifter. He was 48 years old. He was lean where Grizzly was when roped with the kind of muscle a man earns swinging wrenches in a machine shop for 15 years before he swings fists for a living. His arms were a chaotic tapestry of faded ink, and the sleeveless denim cut hanging on the stool beside him bore the winged death's head of the Hells Angels on its back, a patch he had worn for 17 years and 4 months. He was staring at his coffee the way a man stares at a river he is thinking of walking into. Today was April the 23rd. Today his daughter turned 25. Her name was Juniper, Juniper Holloway. He had not seen her face in the flesh since she was 15 years old and had told him standing on her mother's porch in a cold wind outside Billings that she did not want a father who rode with men like the men he rode with. She had said it without tears and without anger, the way you sign a document, and then she had gone inside and closed the door, and for 10 years, Drifter had honored that closed door by staying on his side of it. In the inside pocket of his cut folded very small was an envelope. It had arrived at the Iron Mountains post office box 3 weeks ago. His name was written on the front in a hand he had not seen since his daughter was 8 years old, looping and careful. He had not opened it. He carried it with him every day. On the nights when he could not sleep, he would take it out and look at the front of it and put it back. He had been planning tonight to open it. He had been planning this for 2 weeks. He had come to the clubhouse because he wanted to be around his brothers when he did it, not because he wanted to share it, because he did not want to be alone. The burner phone beside his coffee cup buzzed. Drifter frowned. The burner was a prepaid thing he had owned for 11 months. 3 people in the world had the number. His sponsor from his brief dry spell 6 years back, his bail bondsman in Hamilton, and a brother of his who was doing 9 to 11 in Deer Lodge. Nobody else. Not the club, not his ex-wife, not Juniper. He picked it up. The screen read, "Unknown number. New message." He thumbed it open. "Please, this is not a joke. My name is Ren. I am 15 years old. A man broke into my house at 4242 Pinecrest Road in Stevensville, Montana. He has a crowbar. I am hiding. Please call 911. Drifter read it twice. He was a man who had been around long enough to smell a setup from 40 feet, and his first instinct was that this was one. Cops played games. Rivals played games. Some bored kid with a stolen number list played games. The easy thing to do, the smart thing, was to delete it and thumb the phone back down and go back to his coffee. His eyes moved to the numbers. I am 15 years old. He read it a third time, and something inside his chest, something old and scarred and heavily locked up, turned a key. It had not turned in 10 years. He did not look at the clock. He did not have to. He knew what day it was. He knew what his daughter had been 10 years ago. He stood up. Grizzly, the big man, did not look up from the pool table. He was lining up a bank shot on the 8. Working, brother. Leave it. Something in Drifter's voice moved the whole room. The bartender set down the rag he was using. The 2 men at the corner booth turned their heads. Roman Kowalski, the youngest full patch in the charter, a 35-year-old former Marine they called Hammer, for the way he swung a crescent wrench, stopped chalking his cue. Grizzly straightened. He was not a man who was easily pulled away from a pool game. He was also not a man who questioned the tone in Drifter's voice. Drifter handed him the phone. Grizzly read it. His face did not change. Grizzly's face almost never changed. But the muscle under his left eye ticked once, a small, involuntary movement, like a storm flag going up. Set up? Maybe, Drifter said. His voice was low and even. Look at the address. Grizzly looked. The muscle under his eye ticked again, this time slower. Pinecrest. Pinecrest. Hammer had come over now, wiping chalk on his jeans. What's on Pinecrest? Dallas Reeve, Grizzly said. The name dropped into the room like a stone into a well. Every man in the bar knew that name. Dallas Reeve was a 42-year-old wreck of a human being who had been spotted twice in the last week in Hamilton, looking rough, looking dangerous, looking like a man running out of road. And Dallas Reeve owed the Iron Mountain Charter $2,200 from a botched parts deal 6 months back. He had been, for those 6 months, a man the club had been looking for without finding. Reeve's on Pinecrest, Hammer said. Reeve's been up on the ridge somewhere, Grizzly said. Word was he was shacked up with some tweaker who runs deer out of season. We had it narrowed to 3 properties. Pinecrest would fit. He looked at the phone. A girl. A girl, Drifter said. He did not say 15. He did not have to. Grizzly had been at the clubhouse 10 years ago on the night Drifter came in and drank himself sideways and said for the first and last time his daughter's name. Grizzly handed the phone back. Write her back. Drifter wrote, "This is not Corbin. You have the wrong number. Tell me where you are. Tell me if you are safe." He hit send. Then because he did not trust himself, he added, "I can get someone to you. Tell me your name again. Tell me his name." He waited. The room waited. Merle Haggard on the jukebox saying something about Mama tried. The phone buzzed. The phone, "Dees to hum. My name is Ren. His name is Dallas Reeve. He is downstairs. I think he's going to come upstairs soon. My mom is at the hospital. I am in the upstairs closet on the 2nd floor. I am scared. Please." Drifter read it. Then the second message came in 3 seconds behind the first and his hand tightened on the phone until the plastic creaked. "I am 15 years old." Grizzly was watching him. He had seen the second message over Drifter's shoulder. The older biker reached into the breast pocket of his cut and took out a black metal whistle on a steel chain. He blew it once. A short, sharp, piercing note that cut through the jukebox and the rain and the low conversation at the booths. Every head in the Iron Mountain turned. "Church," Big Grizzly said. "Riding church. 2 minutes. Gear up." Nobody asked. Nobody hesitated. Cues were set down. Beers were pushed away. Cuts came off the backs of chairs. Within 90 seconds, 11 men were standing in a loose half circle near the front door, pulling on gloves and buckling on helmets. And Cormac Grizzly Vance was speaking to them in the flat-clipped voice he used exactly 3 times a year. "We got a situation. A 15-year-old girl up on Pinecrest Road texted the wrong number. Landed on Drifter's burner. Dallas Reeve is in the house with her. Alone, storms knocked the grid. 911 is swamped. Sheriff's got a pileup on Highway 9, and he can't get a unit up the ridge for an hour minimum. We can be there in 12. Reeve's ours anyway," said Hammer, pulling on his gloves. "Reeve's ours anyway," Grizzly agreed. "But that ain't the reason we're riding. The reason we're riding is there's a kid in a closet and there ain't nobody else coming." He looked around the circle. "Anybody got a problem with that, stay here." No questions asked. Nobody moved. Grizzly nodded once. "Drifter, you're on the phone. You keep her talking. You keep her breathing. You keep her in that closet until we are through her front door. You understand me?" "Yeah," Drifter said. "Then let's ride." Drifter thumbed the phone as they walked out into the rain. "Ren, my name is Drifter. I got your message. Help is 12 minutes out. I need you to do 3 things. Stay in the closet, keep your phone on the lowest brightness, and tell me every sound you hear. I am not going anywhere. I am on this phone with you until my brothers come through your front door." 3 seconds later. "Okay, then he is at the top of the stairs." The rain hit them like a cold wall when they stepped outside. The parking lot of the Iron Mountain had turned to a black mirror. The 11 Harleys came to life in a rolling, thunderous chain of ignition, one after the other, until the sound was less like engines and more like the earth itself clearing its throat. Grizzly took point. Drifter rode second, the burner phone zipped inside a waterproof pouch clipped to his handlebars, its screen glowing faintly through the plastic. Hammer rode his right flank. The rest formed up in a tight wedge behind them. They pulled out of the lot and onto Highway 93 heading north, and they opened them up. Up on Pinecrest Ridge in the dark of her closet, Ren Ashford was listening to Dallas Reeve climb her stairs. He was taking them slowly, one at a time. The 13th step creaked the way it always creaked, and then the 14th, and then the landing. She heard his breathing on the landing. It was wet and unsteady, and she realized with a cold, distant part of her mind that he was high, not drunk, high on something sharper, something that made him patient and wrong at the same time. Ren. He had learned her name. Of course he had. He had heard her mother say it. He had heard the school call it out at pickup. He had been watching this house longer than any of them had known. "Ren, honey, I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk to you about your mama." Her phone buzzed against her thigh. She had to clap her hand over the speaker to keep it from vibrating against the closet wall. She lifted the screen an inch and read, "Talk to me, Ren." "Where is he? How close?" She typed with one thumb, the other hand pressed to her lips. Hez on the landing, maybe 20 feet from my door. He knows my name. He's asking about my mom. What does he want from your mom? She thought about it. She had not had time to think about it before. But now in the cold, concentrated silence of the closet, her mathematician's mind began to work again, the way it always worked on any problem put in front of it. Her mother 2 weeks ago, coming home from a double shift, had been white, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood, just staring. When Wren had asked what was wrong, Nora had said, "Nothing, sweetheart, just a long day." And then she had gone into the bedroom, and Wren had heard the click of the little fireproof lockbox under the bed being opened and closed. Her mother 5 days ago telling Wren to take the back way home from school. Her mother 3 nights ago on the phone with Aunt Miriam whispering, "I think I have to go to the police, ma'am. I think I have to, but if I do and they don't believe me," and then trailing off. Her mother this very morning kissing the top of her head before the double shift and saying, "Lock the deadbolt, honey. Lock the deadbolt, even if you're just running out to the mailbox." Wren typed, "I think my mom found something at work. She works at Ravalli Regional. She's a pharmacy tech. She has been scared for 2 weeks. I think she has something in a lockbox under her bed. I think that man downstairs is here to get it." There was a pause on the other end, a long one, long enough that Wren thought the connection had dropped. Then, "Good girl. That is very good thinking. You stay in that closet. We are 9 minutes out." Reeve was at her bedroom door. "Wren, sweetheart." He pushed the door open. The hinges gave their long, familiar squeal. Through the slats of the closet door, Wren saw the narrow beam of his flashlight sweep across the floor. It caught the edge of her desk, the leg of her bed, the corner of the rug. It swept past the closet door and did not stop. "Come on out, honey. This can be easy." He tapped something against her bed frame. A slow, metallic clack. It was the crowbar. She had not seen it, but she knew the sound. She had helped her father pry open crates with one in the garage when she was 8. The flashlight swept back. This time it paused on the closet door. It hung there 3 seconds. 4. She could hear Dallas Reeve breathing. She could hear something else too underneath the rain. Something low, rhythmic, distant. Not thunder. Thunder rolls and fades. This sound was rising, steady, angry, mechanical. The flashlight moved off the closet door. Reeve had heard it too. He crossed to the bedroom window. She heard the slat blinds rattle as he parted them with 2 fingers. "The hell," he muttered. The sound was getting louder. It had shape now. It was an engine. Engines, a lot of them, low and throaty and coming up the grade of Pinecrest Road at a speed that the Pinecrest Road in these conditions should not have allowed. Reeve pulled back from the window. Wren heard the crowbar shift in his grip. Her phone buzzed. "We're on your driveway. Stay in the closet. Do not come out until I say your name." Outside, 11 Harleys came up the last 100 yards of the muddy driveway, with their headlights blazing and the winged death's heads on their backs, running with rain. Grizzly went first. He did not slow down. He rolled his bike right up onto the grass of the front yard, kicked the stand, dismounted in one motion, and walked toward the porch the way a man walks toward a fire he intends to put out. Behind him, the rest of the charter fanned out into a semicircle around the front of the house, their headlights painting the white clapboard in hot angled columns of light. Drifter swung off his bike. He took the phone out of the pouch and kept typing as he moved. "Wren, I am on your porch. I am coming in." "Where is he now?" "In my room." He went to the window. "He saw you." "Good. Stay down." Grizzly was at the front door. He did not knock. He took one step back, set his boot at a 45-degree angle just above the knob, and kicked. The door came off the frame and slammed against the inside wall, hard enough to knock a framed photograph down. "Reeve." Grizzly's voice filled the house. It did not shout. It did not have to. It was the voice of a man who had decided with terrible clarity that the next 10 minutes were going to end one way and one way only. Upstairs, Dallas Reeve made a decision of his own. He had come to this house with a crowbar to scare a woman and take a girl. He had not come to meet 11 patched Hells Angels on a Thursday night in a storm. But he was not a man without weapons. He reached behind his back under his jacket and came up with the weight that had been riding the waistband of his jeans since Hamilton. It was a Smith & Wesson 9mm loaded with an 8-round magazine plus one in the pipe. He had taken it 2 days ago from a house on the far side of the county. He had not told Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood about the gun. He had not told anyone. He thumbed the safety off. "Come on, then," he said. He said it to himself in the dark of a 15-year-old girl's bedroom. Come on, then. Downstairs, Grizzly was moving through the ruined living room with the slow liquid economy of a man who has cleared 100 rooms in his life. Drifter was 2 steps behind his left shoulder. Hammer was coming in the side door off the kitchen, angling up the back staircase. 3 other members were spreading to cover the windows. The rest were on the perimeter, eyes on the tree line, eyes on the driveway. Drifter's phone buzzed in his hand. He has a gun. Drifter's thumb stopped over the keyboard. Say that again, Ren. I heard him take the safety off. I know the sound. My dad used to take me shooting. He has a gun. He didn't have it downstairs. He must have had it under his coat. Drifter showed the screen to Grizzly without a word. Grizzly's jaw worked once, twice. He held up a flat hand. The entire column behind him froze on the staircase. Hammer at the top of the back stairs caught the signal in the reflection of the hallway window and stopped. Grizzly tilted his head toward Drifter's phone. Ren, listen to me. This is important. Is his bedroom door open or closed? The reply came fast. Open. He opened it when he came in. He is standing near the window, about 8 feet from the closet, facing the window. Grizzly exhaled. He held up 2 fingers, then pointed at his eyes, then pointed up the stairs and around the corner toward the master bedroom. Hammer in the reflection nodded. He began to move. The plan was forming silently in the language of men who had done this before. They were going to flank him. Hammer through the master, Grizzly up the main stairs. Drifter on the phone keeping the girl still. They were halfway into position when Dallas Reeve in the dark of Ren Ashford's bedroom panicked. He fired. He fired into the bedroom door blind because he heard the creak of a floorboard on the landing. The first round punched through the thin hollow core door and hit the hallway wall in a spray of drywall. The second round went high and took a chunk out of the crown molding. The third round hit Roman Hammer Kowalski in the left shoulder just under the clavicle as he was easing around the corner from the master bedroom. Hammer went down. He went down hard. He did not yell. Hammer had been shot in Fallujah when he was 23, and he had been shot in a parking lot in Great Falls when he was 29. And the one thing he had learned both times was that yelling did not help. He slid down against the hallway wall, clamped his right hand over the wound, and his eyes found Grizzly's across the top of the stairs. Grizzly's mouth made a single word. Alive, Hammer nodded once. Alive. Drifter felt the bullet impact through the floor under his boots. His phone buzzed against his palm at the same moment. He just shot at the door. 3 times. He has 6 left if it's a full magazine. He stared at the screen. Ren, how do you know that? It's a 9mm. I heard the slide before. Standard Smith & Wesson magazine is 8 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. He fired 3. He has 6 left. Maybe a 7th if he had one chambered. He is about 8 feet from the closet. He is between me and the window. He is not between you and me. Drifter looked at Grizzly. Grizzly had read it over his shoulder. Grizzly's face, for the first time all night, did something new. It almost smiled. That little girl, Grizzly said very quietly, is better than half the boots I served with. Drifter did not answer. He was already typing. Ren, you are a very brave person. We are coming in 10 seconds. When you hear us, you get flat on the floor of that closet. You put your arms over your head. You do not come out until I say your name. Do you understand? I understand. And Ren, yes, keep counting. He pocketed the phone. He looked at Grizzly. Grizzly looked at Hammer bleeding against the hallway wall, but conscious and furious. Hammer mouthed go. Grizzly went. He came around the corner of the landing at a speed that did not belong to a man his size. Drifter came behind him, low to the outside. They crossed the hallway in 2 strides. At the bedroom door, Grizzly did not breach through the center. He hit it low, shoulder down, driving through the bottom third, where the handle and frame were weakest. The door exploded inward. Dallas Reeve, already twitchy, already high-fired twice more. 1 round went into the doorframe above Grizzly's head. The other went through the ceiling because Drifter had come in at his knees and hit him at the belt line, like a free safety taking a running back at the goal line. Reeve hit the floor with 240 pounds of pissed-off ex-machinist on top of him. The gun came loose. It skittered across the hardwood and stopped against the leg of the bed. 5, came a small, even voice from inside the closet. He has 5 left. Now 4. Now the gun's on the floor. 0. Drifter, pinning Reeves' wrist to the hardwood, looked toward the slatted doors of the closet. Behind him, Grizzly was already binding Reeves' ankles with a zip tie from his back pocket, working with the calm, fast hands of a man who had been doing this longer than most people had been driving. "Rend Hama," Drifter said. His voice, for the first time that night, cracked at the edges. "It's Drifter. You can come out now, honey. It is over. It is over. You can come out." There was a pause. Then the slats of the closet door moved. They moved slowly, carefully, the way a wild animal moves when it is checking whether the trap has really been sprung. And then Wren Ashford pushed the closet door open and crawled out into the ruined bedroom of the house where she had lived her whole life. Her face was dirty. Her eyes were huge. She was still clutching her phone. She looked at Dallas Reeve, hog-tied and cursing into the floorboards, and her face did not change. Then she looked up at the man kneeling in front of her. She saw the faded winged death's head on the front patch of his cut. She saw the scars on his hands. She saw the gray in his beard. She saw his eyes. She saw in his eyes something that took her a long moment to recognize, because it was not something she had expected to find in a man who had just kicked down her door. It was recognition. Drifter was looking at her like he had seen her somewhere before. He had not, of course. She was a stranger. He had never met Wren Ashford in his life. But for 10 long years, every time Drifter Holloway had closed his eyes and tried to remember what his daughter Juniper had looked like at 15, this was the face his mind had drawn. Small, sharp, watchful, brave. The face of a girl who was not going to be told she could not save herself. "You okay, kid?" Wren Ashford looked at him. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked back at the closet, at the pile of her mother's old winter coats, at the little glowing rectangle of her phone screen, still pulsing softly in her hand. She looked at the shattered doorframe. She looked at the muddy boots of the man who had just killed the worst night of her life. "I counted his bullets," she said. "It came out very small." "Yeah," Drifter said. "You did." And then, because she was 15 years old, and because the last 30 minutes had been the longest 30 minutes of her short life, and because it was finally safe to stop holding everything, in Wren Ashford's face crumpled, and she began to cry. Not loudly, not a child's cry, a hard, shaking, silent cry, with her shoulders curled in on themselves like she was trying to keep the pieces together by hand. Drifter did not touch her. He did not move any closer. He just knelt there in the wreckage of her bedroom, with Dallas Reeve cursing into the floor 3 feet away, and he waited. He waited the way a man waits when a wild thing has come halfway out of a burrow, and the only thing that will break it is a hand moving too fast. After a minute, he said very gently, "Your mama, is she Nora?" Wren nodded without lifting her head. "Pharmacy tech at Ravalli Regional." Another nod. "Okay, sweetheart, we are going to call her, you and me, right now. And we are going to tell her to come home." "Okay. Okay. And then you and me are going to go downstairs, and you are not going to look at this man on the floor, and we are going to sit in the kitchen, and my brother Grizzly is going to find something for you to drink, and we are going to wait for your mama together." "Okay. Okay. Can you stand up?" She nodded. She did not stand up. Drifter held out his hand. Wren Ashford, 15 years old, math Olympiad champion, brave enough to count bullets in a dark closet while a man with a gun was 8 feet from her door, looked at the hand of the stranger in the leather cut. She took it. Downstairs, in the ruin of the living room, the other members of the charter were moving with the quiet efficiency of a crew that had done too many cleanups to count. 2 of them were checking the perimeter. One was sitting with Hammer, applying pressure to the shoulder wound with a clean t-shirt, murmuring steady low words in the tone a father uses with a son who has fallen off a bike. Hammer was gritting his teeth and cursing in Polish, which Grizzly had long ago learned to take as a sign that Hammer was going to be fine. Grizzly himself came down the stairs with the small black metal lockbox under his arm. He had found it exactly where Wren had said, under the master bedroom mattress. He set it on the kitchen table, took out a pocket knife, and worked the latch in under 30 seconds. The lid came open. Drifter came into the kitchen with his arm around Wren's shoulders, and Grizzly looked up from the box. "Brother," he said. The tone was the tone that always meant, "You need to see this." Drifter walked over. He looked down at the contents of the box. Under a social security card and a birth certificate and a copy of a divorce decree, there was a small black moleskin notebook. Grizzly had it open on the table. The pages were filled with tight, cramped handwriting. columns of numbers, lot codes, quantities, dates, initials, and the other initials that appeared at the top of every single phantom transfer authorizing every single one were TB. Drifter looked at Grizzly. "Thaddeus Blackwood," Grizzly said. Wren, who had been standing very still against Drifter's side, looked down at the page. Her face changed. It was a small change, a tightening at the corners of the mouth, a narrowing of the eyes, the expression of a girl who has just been shown a problem set and has started without permission to solve it. "Those aren't random," she said. Grizzly looked at her. "The lot codes," she said. She reached out a finger slowly and traced down the left-hand column. "They aren't random. They're encoded, every third digit. See?" Drifter and Grizzly looked at each other over her head. Wren was already flipping pages. "It's a substitution. See here and here. If you strip out the middle digit of each lot code and read down, you get dates. If you read across two columns, you get quantities that don't match the hospital inventory system. My mom's lot codes. She showed me once. The real ones. These are fake. Somebody made these look like real hospital entries, but they aren't. They're a second set of books." She looked up. "This is a ledger. It's the whole ledger." In the silence that followed, 4 miles away, in a very clean, very quiet home office in a 4,000 square foot house on the good side of Hamilton Drive, Thaddeus Blackwood was pouring himself 2 fingers of an 18-year Macallan when his phone rang. He looked at the number. He took a long breath. He picked up. "Yes." He listened. His face did not change. His face almost never changed. He was a man with a very good face for not changing. "And the girl," he said. He listened. "She saw it." He said. He listened. His hand tightened on the heavy crystal tumbler. The amber liquid trembled once very slightly, and then was still. "I understand," Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood said, in the pleasant, measured baritone that had been reassuring patients and their families at Ravalli Regional Medical Center for 26 years. "Then the girl is a problem, and problems, as you know, have solutions." He took a long sip of the Macallan. "Make her disappear." The storm broke an hour before dawn, the way storms in the Bitterroot always break with a last hard push of rain, and then a silence so complete it felt staged. By the time the first gray light crawled over the eastern ridge, the Ashford farmhouse was full of men in leather cuts and the smell of coffee that Grizzly had made in Nora's percolator, the old one with the chipped handle, and the house that had felt like a coffin 6 hours earlier, now felt strangely like a fortress. Nora Ashford had come home at 4:12 in the morning. She had driven the last mile of Pinecrest Road with both hands locked white on the wheel of her old Subaru, and when she had pulled up to a driveway full of Harleys and a front door that was not a door anymore, she had not screamed. She had gotten out of the car and walked up the ruined porch steps and into her living room, and she had seen her daughter sitting at the kitchen table with a blanket around her shoulders and a mug of something warm in her hands, and Nora Ashford had walked straight across the room and dropped to her knees in front of her daughter and put her forehead against her daughter's forehead, and for a full minute, neither of them had said a single word. Drifter had watched it from the doorway of the kitchen. He had not looked away exactly. He had just put a little more weight on the doorframe than he had been putting, and he had thought very quietly about an envelope in the inside pocket of his cut, and he had decided that tonight was not, after all, the night he was going to open it. Sheriff Eamon Pritchard had arrived at 4:40 with 3 deputies and a sour expression. He had taken one look at Dallas Reeve, who was now zip-tied to a dining room chair with a dish rag stuffed in his mouth, and one look at the small black lockbox open on the kitchen table, and one look at the 11 patched Hells Angels arranged through his crime scene like a quiet army, and Sheriff Pritchard had set his hat down on the counter and had said to Grizzly in a voice flat as a board, "Tanner Holloway, you are going to tell me exactly what happened here, from the top. And then we are going to have a conversation about a certain young lady I have a feeling I am going to be seeing a lot of in the next few months." He had called Wren a young lady. He had looked at Wren when he said it with something in his eyes that was half weariness and half something else. Something softer, and Wren had looked back at him without flinching. By 6 in the morning, Dallas Reeve was in the back of a cruiser on his way to the county jail. Hammer was at Ravalli Regional getting a 9mm round dug out of his shoulder by an orthopedic resident who had enough sense not to ask too many questions. Nora had been shown the moleskin notebook. She had looked at it a long time without touching it. Then she had said very quietly, "I thought I was going crazy. For 2 weeks I thought I was going crazy." and Wren had said you weren't. Now it was Saturday, 2 days later. The sun was coming through the kitchen window of the Ashford farmhouse in long, pale bars, and Wren Ashford was sitting at the same table where she had sat on Thursday night, but she was not drinking cocoa, and she was not crying. She was working. Spread out in front of her were four things. The first was the moleskin notebook still open to the page Grizzly had first opened. The second was a yellow legal pad half covered in her handwriting. The third was a small stack of her mother's old pharmacy lot sheets, which Nora had pulled from the banker's box in the hall closet where she kept her work records. The fourth was a mechanical pencil with a chewed eraser. Drifter was at the other end of the table nursing a cup of black coffee and pretending not to watch her. She had not slept in the way most people would understand sleep. She had gone to bed at 9 o'clock on Friday night. She had closed her eyes. She had opened them again somewhere around 1 in the morning with a number in her head. She had gotten up, put on her father's old flannel robe, and come down to the kitchen in her socks. She had not turned on the overhead light. She had turned on the small lamp over the stove, and she had opened the notebook, and she had begun to write. By Saturday morning, she had filled 11 pages of the legal pad. Wren Bayard, Nora said from the doorway. She was in her nursing scrubs about to leave for a shift she had tried to cancel and been told gently by her supervisor and forcefully by Sheriff Pritchard that she should not cancel because canceling would look like something. Did you sleep? Some. That's not an answer, honey. I slept enough. Drifter took a sip of his coffee and said nothing. Nora came over and put her hand on top of Wren's head the way she had been doing since Wren was 2. What have you got? Wren looked up. Her eyes were bright. They were not tired eyes. They were the eyes of a person who has taken a piece of the world apart and put it back together in the dark and who is now waiting for someone to tell her whether the new arrangement makes sense. Mom, she said, it's not just the ledger. What do you mean, baby? I mean, the notebook is only half of it. The notebook has the lot codes and the quantities and the initials. But it doesn't have the buyers, it doesn't have the drop locations, it doesn't have the nurse. Nora's face went very still. What nurse, she said, the one helping him. Honey, we don't know if there's a nurse. Mom, there has to be a nurse. Look at this. Wren flipped the notebook open to a page in the middle. These transfers are happening during shift changes on Tuesdays and Fridays. Every single time, between 7 and 8 at night, shift change at Ravalli Regional is 7 to 7:15. Somebody is moving product during that 15-minute window when there are 2 sets of staff in the pharmacy and the count is in transition. Dr. Blackwood doesn't work in the pharmacy. He's chief of medicine. He can't be the one pulling the drawer. Somebody's pulling the drawer for him. And they have to have access to your lot sheets because, look, she turned the legal pad toward her mother. These fake lot codes aren't random. They piggyback on your real ones. Every fake transfer is within 1 digit of a real transfer you logged that same week. Whoever is doing this has access to your records within 24 hours of you filing them. Nora sat down slowly in the chair across from her daughter. She looked at the legal pad. She looked at the moleskin notebook. She looked at her daughter, the small, fierce person she had raised, and her face did something complicated. Wren, she said, honey, how long have you been on this? Since Friday morning. By yourself. Yeah. Drifter at the end of the table cleared his throat. Not by herself, ma'am, he said. I've been here. You've been drinking coffee, Holloway. I've been drinking coffee and witnessing, ma'am, which is harder than it looks. Nora did not smile, but the corner of her mouth moved just a little, and that was the first time she had come close to anything like a smile in 48 hours. She reached across the table and closed her hand over her daughter's. Baby, she said, this is FBI work. I know. I mean, this is not your job. I know. Then why are you doing it? Wren looked at her mother. She was quiet a long time. She looked down at the legal pad at her own neat, small handwriting, marching in columns. Because I'm the only one who can see it, Mom, she said. That was the first twist of the second act, though nobody at the kitchen table that Saturday morning said the word twist because it was not that kind of Saturday morning. Nobody said this is going to change everything. They just sat there, the three of them, in the yellow light, and they understood it silently the way families understand things. The notebook alone was not enough. The notebook was a list of numbers. The FBI could subpoena hospital records and match them against the notebook and build a slow-grinding 2-year case that a good lawyer could pick apart. But if you paired the notebook with Wren with her chewed pencil and her legal pad and the cold, perfect engine of her memory, you had a witness who could sit in a federal courtroom and explain in plain language what the numbers actually meant. You had a witness who could name the pattern. You had a witness who could say there is a nurse and then tell them by the math which nights, which drawers, which windows. You had, in other words, the only person in Montana who could walk a jury all the way across the river. And that was why 300 miles south in an office on the 29th floor of a building in Salt Lake City, a man named Curtis Vane was at that very moment picking up a phone. Curtis Vane was 46 years old. He wore tailored jackets and small round glasses, and he kept his hair cropped close to the skull. He had been born on a wheat farm in eastern Colorado, and he had spent 15 years moving steadily up the chain of an organization that did not technically have a name, but that inside the federal task force that tracked it was called the Silver Creek Syndicate. The syndicate did not sell drugs on street corners. It moved pharmaceuticals, clean ones, pristine ones. Hospital-grade fentanyl patches, oxycodone morphine, moved in tidy insulated containers through a web of corrupt physicians and compliant pharmacy techs from Billings to Spokane. It was a business that ran on reputation and on silence, and it was above all a business that cleaned up its own messes. Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood was one of Curtis Vane's best earners. Curtis Vane did not like losing earners. He listened to the man on the other end of the phone for 3 minutes without speaking. Then he said, "How old?" He listened. 15. He tapped one finger against the desk. "No," he said, "we do not send amateurs for this. We do not send the local product. Send me 4 from the Idaho cell, the clean ones. Tell them it is a home visit, nothing heavy, a mother and a daughter. The mother is 40, the daughter is 15. I want it to look like the drifter came back for revenge from his jail cell. I want it to look like a tragedy. I want them in the house by 3 a.m. Tuesday. I want them out of the house by 3:15. And Blackwood is to wire the payment to the usual account before they cross the state line." A pause. "One more thing." He listened to the voice on the other end ask the question. "Yes," said Curtis Vane. "The bikers too. If they are in the way, they are in the way, but they are not our target. The target is the mother and the girl. If a man in a leather cut sees something he should not see, then the problem gets bigger. Don't let it get bigger." He set the phone down. He took off his small round glasses. He polished them with a microfiber cloth. He put them back on. On Monday night, Drifter came out of the Iron Mountain Saloon at 11:30 with the burner phone in his hand and a face like a closed door. Grizzly was on the porch smoking one of his rare cigars. The storm had come back, not hard, just a steady cold drizzle that made the street under the sodium lights look like a black mirror. The rest of the charter was inside. Hammer was back from the hospital, his left arm in a sling, his right hand wrapped around a beer bottle. He was not drinking because the pain meds said no. He had spent the last 24 hours telling everyone who would listen that he was fine, and also that he was going to personally escort Dallas Reeves' next cellmate through a very specific set of introductions, and the charter was mostly letting him talk because Hammer needed to talk. Drifter leaned on the porch railing beside Grizzly. Rain ticked off the brim of his cap. Tank got a call. Grizzly did not answer. He just drew on his cigar. From a cop in Hamilton. Which cop? Dependable one. The one whose brother we helped out in 19. Go on. Deputy named Porter, over in Pritchard's shop, has been seen twice in the last week eating lunch with a man who drives a very nice car that does not belong to a deputy sheriff's friend. Grizzly took the cigar out of his mouth. Porter. Porter. Damn it. Yeah. They know where the notebook is. They know where everything is, brother. You know. They know Wren is the one who cracked it. They know Pritchard's made the call to the Salt Lake field office. They know the subpoenas are being drawn up right now. They know Monday night is the last soft window they got before this whole thing locks down. Grizzly put the cigar back in his mouth. He turned it slowly between his teeth. Tonight, then. Tomorrow night, early Tuesday morning. 3 a.m. is my guess. That's the window when everything is quiet and any cruiser passing Pinecrest will have just finished its 2:30 check. How many? 4, maybe 5. Professional. Idaho cell tanks guy thinks, not local. And Porter. Porter's going to make sure Pritchard's nearest unit is 60 miles north, working a reported break-in that isn't going to be there when they get there. Grizzly looked at the end of his cigar. The coal glowed bright, dimmed, glowed again. We should tell Pritchard. Pritchard can't move his own deputies. If he tries, Porter tips off Vane's people and they move the hit up to tonight and we're not ready tonight. Then we handle it. Then we handle it. Grizzly looked at Drifter for a long moment. Brother, he said, you and me, we don't do this for civilians. I know. I'm asking you if you know what you're asking me to vote for in church in about an hour. I know exactly what I'm asking you to vote for. Why? Drifter looked out at the rain on the asphalt. He thought about a closet door. He thought about a small face with big eyes reading bullet counts in the dark. He thought about an envelope in the inside pocket of his cut that he had not opened in 3 weeks and about a phone call he had not yet made. Because I told her I'd come, he said, 2 nights ago. I told her help was coming. And the thing I told her was not, we're coming this one time and then you're on your own. The thing I told her was, we're coming. And I have not found a way yet to uncheck that. Grizzly nodded slowly. All right. All right. You get church, brother. I'll vote with you. Whether the rest of them do is their business. It turned out to be their business the way Grizzly had known it would be. At midnight in the back room of the Iron Mountain, every patch member of the charter raised a hand in favor of, as Grizzly phrased it, extending our hospitality to the Ashford family for one additional evening. Hammer raised his hand before anybody else. Hammer also announced that he was going on the extension badge shoulder or not, and when 3 brothers tried to argue with him, Hammer told them in detailed Polish what he thought of their arguments, and the arguments died. By 1 a.m. on Tuesday, they were in position. The Ashford farmhouse at 4242 Pinecrest sat on 7 acres. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the road. Behind the house, a long, sloping field ran up to the tree line where a dense stand of ponderosa pine and Douglas fir climbed the ridge. In front of the house, the driveway curled for 180 yards through more open ground before reaching the gravel of Pinecrest Road. Hammer was in the ponderosa 35 feet up in a crooked branch he had scouted at dusk. He had a pair of military-grade thermal binoculars, a suppressed Ruger 10/22 across his lap, and his sling tucked up under his jacket. He was by his own calm assessment shootable with his right hand at up to 40 yards, and that was all he needed to be tonight. Grizzly was behind the rusted hulk of the old Ford tractor on the east side of the house. He was wearing black from head to heel. His face was painted with dark grease. He looked under the quarter moon like a section of shadow that had decided to stand upright. Drifter was inside the house. That had been the argument. Drifter had wanted to be outside. Grizzly had said no. Grizzly had said, brother, you and I both know there is one person in that house who is the reason all of this is happening, and she trusts you. And if something goes wrong, she is not going to listen to anybody else. So you are inside. You are on her. You do not leave her side. Drifter had understood. He had not liked it. He had gone inside. Now he was in the kitchen of the Ashford house, the lights off with a cup of coffee. He had stopped drinking an hour ago. And he was listening to Wren Ashford explain very calmly what she had done to the kitchen floor. Canola oil, she said, a thin layer from the pantry to the sink. If he steps on the tile in this direction, his weight will carry him forward, and he goes down. I wiped it clean on the far side so I have a safe exit. The duct tape is in the drawer by the refrigerator. I pre-cut 3 pieces 18 inches each. The paring knife is in my back pocket. I'm not going to use it. It's just in case. Drifter looked at her in the dark. Kid, he said, no. Drifter. Wren, honey, you are not doing any of that. There are 5 of them. There are 4 of them. There are 5. He stopped. She looked up at him. In the thin blue moonlight coming through the kitchen window, her face was very pale and very clear. One of them is already inside, she said. Drifter's right hand moved very slowly to the 9mm at his hip. How do you know? Because yesterday afternoon I was in the basement to get the Christmas lights for my mom and the cellar window over the furnace was cracked open. It had been closed Thursday. My mom closed it Thursday when Sheriff Pritchard walked the perimeter. I closed it again yesterday, but there were 2 muddy footprints on the furnace pad and the prints were size 12 and nobody in this house wears size 12. I didn't tell you yesterday because I wasn't sure. I'm sure now. I went down again an hour ago. The footprints were gone. Someone wiped them. Wren, he's in the crawlspace drifter, or the attic, or the back of the coat closet under the stairs. He's been in this house since Sunday, or Monday. He's waiting for the others to come in the front so he can come up behind us. Drifter stared at her. For the first time in a long, long time, Drifter felt something that was not quite fear. It was older than fear and more specific. It was the feeling a man gets when he realizes that the small person he is supposed to be protecting has already done a piece of the protecting for him because she saw what he did not see. "Where's your mother?" he said. "Upstairs, asleep. I put 2 Benadryl in her tea at 10:30. Ren. She wouldn't have gone to sleep. She wanted to help. She can't help. She was just going to be another person to protect. I didn't give her a dangerous dose. I gave her a sleeping dose. She'll wake up at 8 in the morning and yell at me, and I deserve it." Drifter put his hand on top of his own head, like a man pressing down on a pot lid. Then he keyed the earpiece clipped to his collar. "Grizzly, go. We got a 5th. He's been in the house for 36 hours minimum. Somewhere, don't know where." A pause. "Copy. And Grizzly, go." The girl knew, not me, the girl. Another pause longer. "Copy." It happened at 2:53 a.m., 7 minutes earlier than Drifter had predicted. Up in the Ponderosa, Hammer saw them first. 4 heat signatures moving low through the tree line on the east side of the property. Disciplined spacing. Weapons up but not presented. No flashlights. They had come up the back of the ridge on foot, leaving a vehicle at least half a mile down a fire road. Professional work. Idaho cell, just like Tank Sky had said. Hammer keyed his mic once. 4 up, east tree line, moving to the corner of the barn. Grizzly's voice came back dry as chalk. "Let him come to the choke." The choke was the narrow strip of ground between the old Ford tractor and the side of the house, a 6-foot corridor where anyone trying to reach the back door had to pass through single file. Grizzly had chosen it carefully. It was the only piece of ground on the property where 4 men lost their advantage of spread. The 4 hitters reached the tractor at 2:55. Grizzly took the tail man first. He came out of the shadow of the tractor without a sound, and the butt of his sidearm connected with the base of the man's skull before the man had time to register that the piece of darkness beside him had grown hands. The man dropped without a breath. Grizzly caught him under the arms on the way down, lowered him silently, and stepped over him to face the next one. The 3rd hitter turned. He saw Grizzly. He had time to lift his suppressed submachine gun 3 inches before Grizzly's sidearm was under his chin. "Drop it," Grizzly said. The man was a professional. He dropped it. 2 other members of the charter came out of the barn at a dead run, moving low. They were on the remaining 2 hitters before the hitters had fully registered what was happening to their formation. It was not a fight. It was a liquidation. The professionals who had expected to move through a soft target of 1 woman, 1 15-year-old girl, and maybe a stray biker or 2 found themselves instead moving through the territory of a charter that had been doing this for 40 years and that was tonight in an unusually bad mood. 90 seconds after the 4 hitters reached the tractor, 4 hitters were face down in the grass with their hands zip-tied behind them and a patched Hell's Angel kneeling on each of their backs. "Drifter," Grizzly said into the mic. "Outside is clean. 4 down. Watch your 6. Inside the kitchen of the Ashford farmhouse, Drifter had already gone still. He had heard something. It was a small sound. It was the sound of the floorboard in the pantry doorway, the one that creaked at the second step in from the kitchen. Ren had pointed it out to him Friday night. The sound of a board creaking at 2:56 a.m. when Ren Ashford was standing against the counter 8 feet in front of him meant one thing only. The 5th man was in the house. He was in the pantry, and he was coming through. Drifter moved without thinking. He shoved Ren sideways hard down behind the kitchen island just as the pantry door swung open and the 5th man came out of it fast and low, blade first. He had a black combat knife in an overhand grip, and he was not going to fire a weapon in a house he had been told to make look like a revenge killing. He was going to cut. He was going to make it look like Dallas Reeve. He came at Drifter. He got there. The fight that followed lasted, by Grizzly's later estimate, between 11 and 14 seconds, which is a very long time when someone is trying to put a knife into your chest. Drifter was a strong man. The 5th hitter was also a strong man, and he had the knife, and he was coming downhill with momentum. The first slash opened Drifter's left forearm from wrist to elbow, a clean, shallow cut that sprayed blood across the refrigerator and the cabinets. The second slash Drifter caught on the heel of his left hand, shoving the blade wide past his ear. His 9mm was pinned under the hitter's body. His right hand was trying to get to the man's throat and could not because the hitter had his chin tucked. In the corner of his vision, he saw Ren Ashford stand up from behind the kitchen island. He saw her do it in slow motion. He saw his mouth start to form the word down. She did not go down. She stepped into the middle of the kitchen, 2 feet from the edge of the oiled tile, and she said in a voice that was not loud, but that carried across the kitchen like a thrown rock, "Hey." The fifth hitter looked up. It was a reflex. You do not survive in his line of work by ignoring a voice behind you, especially the small voice you did not expect. He looked up. He saw a 15-year-old girl standing in her own kitchen in a flannel robe. He saw her raise her left hand. He saw her holding a meat thermometer. He had a fraction of a second to realize the meat thermometer was not the point. The point was that she was standing 1 step behind a 6-foot strip of canola oil, and that she had just taken 2 steps forward into the strip on purpose. "Come on," Ren Ashford said. He came. He came off Drifter in one convulsive shove, knife still in his right hand, and he took 2 long strides across the kitchen tile toward the girl with the meat thermometer. On the second stride, his boot hit the oil. Physics, which Ren had been working with since she was 8 years old, is a patient teacher. The hitter's forward momentum, which had been serving him faithfully for 98 inches of kitchen floor, became in a single instant his enemy. His right foot slid forward at a speed his right hip could not match. His left foot planting behind caught the leading edge of the oil slick with the inside of the heel. His whole body went up briefly into a kind of grotesque parody of a running man and then came down. Not on his feet, on the back of his head. The sound his skull made on the tile was not a loud sound. It was a dull, clean sound, like a cantaloupe being set down too hard on a cutting board. The knife skittered out of his hand and stopped against the baseboard. Ren stepped carefully around the edge of the oil. She walked to the drawer by the refrigerator. She opened it. She took out the roll of duct tape. She walked back. The hitter was not unconscious. He was groaning. He was trying to roll. He was not managing it because every time he tried, his hands and feet slid out from under him on the oil. Ren put one knee on the back of his neck, which was a move she had not planned and which surprised her, and she used her other knee to pin his right arm, and she began to wrap his wrists with the duct tape. She wrapped them 6 times. She wrapped them hard. She wrapped them the way her father had once shown her how to wrap a wounded rabbit's leg when she was 9 years old, which was the only time in her life before this that she had wrapped anything with duct tape, and she thought absurdly of her father as she did it. She moved to his ankles. She wrapped those too. She stood up. She picked up the combat knife. She held it by the blade carefully the way her father had taught her so that the handle faced out and her fingers were safe. She carried it across the kitchen and set it in the sink. Then she looked at Drifter. Drifter was on one knee in the middle of the kitchen, his left arm bleeding hard into a dish towel he had grabbed off the counter. His face was the color of skim milk. "Holloway," she said. "Yeah. You saved me on Thursday, Drifter." "Yeah. I can handle a part of it tonight." He stared at her. For a long second, he could not make his face do anything. There was too much happening in it. There was the physical shock of the cut down his forearm. There was a tidal wave of a feeling he did not have a name for something that was part pride and part grief and part a very old, very locked up memory of a 10-year-old girl sitting on the handlebars of his Harley in a gravel lot outside a roadside diner in eastern Montana, laughing so hard she could not breathe. There was something else too. He understood it slowly the way you understand a thing in a language you used to speak. He understood that this 15-year-old girl, standing in a kitchen full of canola oil with a subdued professional killer at her feet and her flannel robe tied tight at her waist, was not a substitute for his daughter. She was not a ghost of Juniper. She was not a second chance. She was Ren Ashford. She was her own person. She was a specific, particular, brave, mathematical, stubborn 15-year-old human being who had walked out of a closet 48 hours ago and had decided quietly and without asking permission that she was not going to let the world put her back in one. He was not her father. He would never be her father. He could, however, be the man who had been lucky enough to be on the other end of a wrong number. "Kid," he said, his voice was rough. "You are something else. Your arm's bleeding." "Yeah. There's a first aid kit above the washing machine. Come on, I can stitch it. I've stitched my mom once, a deer antler. Long story. Come on." She crossed the kitchen. She held out her hand. "Drifter Holloway, 48 years old, 17 years, a Hell's Angel, a man who had walked through more kinds of trouble than most people knew existed, took a 15-year-old girl's hand and let her lead him out of the room. Behind them, the fifth hitter groaned into the oiled tile. Outside on the lawn, Grizzly Vance, who had been listening to the whole thing on Drifter's open mic, lowered his head for a second and pressed the heel of his hand against his right eye. Then he keyed his own mic. "Brothers," he said, "the youngest member of the Iron Mountain Charter just captured a Silver Creek contract killer with a bottle of Crisco and a meat thermometer. I don't want to hear a word about this from any of you for the rest of our natural lives. Copy." Copy came back around the perimeter in 6 overlapping voices. "Patch him up and get Pritchard on a secure line. Time to wake the sheriff up." Drifter sat on the closed lid of the washing machine and held his left arm out, palm up, while Wren swabbed it with iodine that stung like a memory. The house was very quiet. Upstairs, Nora Ashford was going to sleep for another 4 hours and 33 minutes, which was on balance probably a mercy. Drifter watched Wren work. Her hands were steady. She was threading a curved needle from the first aid kit with the same absent efficiency with which she had threaded the notebook's numbers the day before. She was 15. She should have been doing algebra homework. "You want to tell me," he said, "how you knew the floorboard in the pantry?" "I know every floorboard in this house, Drifter." "Right. My dad and I mapped them when I was 7. He said any house worth living in is a house you know the sounds of. We drew the map on butcher paper. It's still in the hall closet. I'll show you tomorrow." "Your dad?" "Yeah." "What was his name?" "Thomas." "What did he do?" "He was a welder. He built bridges. He died of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. He was 51. He never got to see me win the math prize. He would have liked it." Drifter did not say anything. He used to say Wren said that the world is divided into people who go toward the sound and people who go away from it. And he said that was the only real kind of person there is. He said it wasn't about being brave. He said it was about deciding once when you were young what direction you were going to face, and then never turning around. She pulled the first stitch through. Her hand was steady. "He would have liked you, Drifter." Drifter, who had not cried in front of another human being since 1994, looked very hard at the tile floor between his boots. "Hey," Wren said, "can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "That envelope, the one you carry around in your cut, what is it?" Drifter's right hand went involuntarily to his chest. "How did you know about that?" "You touch it, Drifter. Every 15 minutes. I've been watching for 3 days. You don't even know you're doing it." He almost laughed. It came out as something closer to an exhale. "It's a letter." "From who?" "My daughter." "Oh, her name is Juniper. She turned 25 on Thursday. I haven't seen her since she was your age. She wrote to me 3 weeks ago. I haven't opened it." Wren tied off the stitch. She started a new one. She did not look up. "Why not?" "Because I'm scared of what it says." "Is that a good reason?" "It's the only one I've got." Drifter. "Yeah." "Have you ever called her?" "Not in 10 years." "Why not?" He sat there a long time. She did not rush him. "Because 10 years ago," he said, "she told me she didn't want a father who rode with the men I ride with. And I thought the only thing I could give her after taking so much was to not argue with her about that." Wren nodded slowly. She tied off another stitch. "But she wrote you." "She wrote me. So something changed. I guess." Drifter. "Yeah. You should open it." "Tonight's not the night. Tonight's a fine night. You almost died in my kitchen 40 minutes ago. You think you're going to get a better one." He looked at her, 15 years old, flannel robe, iodine on her fingers. A small, fierce, unsentimental face, the face of a kid who had stood in her own kitchen tonight and decided which direction she was going to face and then faced it. He reached into the inside pocket of his cut. The envelope was there. It was a little damp from the rain on the ride over. His name was written on the front in that careful looping hand. He slid his thumb under the flap. He tore it open. He took out the single page inside. He unfolded it. He read it. His face did not change exactly, but something behind the face came loose the way a door that has been locked for a long time comes off its latch. He read it a second time. He folded it in half. He folded it in half again. He looked at Wren. "She's having a baby," he said. "Yeah, a girl, in July." "Yeah, she says." He cleared his throat. She says she wants her daughter to know her grandfather. She says she's sorry it took her 10 years to write. She says she's not sorry for what she said at 15, because at 15 she was right. But she says she's 25 now, and she's read some things, and she thinks maybe a man can change without stopping being who he is. She says she's not asking me to come to Boston. She's asking if I'd want her to come to Montana in August with the baby. Ren did not say anything. She just kept stitching because her throat had gotten tight, and she was a person who, when her throat got tight, did the next practical thing in front of her. Ren, Drifter said, "Yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For the question." She nodded. She tied off the last stitch. She cut the thread with a pair of small scissors from the kit. She looked at her work. It was not pretty. It was going to leave a scar that would follow the inside of his forearm like a second tattoo. But it was closed and it was clean and it would hold. Drifter. "Yeah. After tonight, after all of this is over, when you call her back, when she comes in August with the baby." "Yeah. Could I meet them?" He looked at her. "Kid," he said, "you're going to be in my life whether you like it or not until one of us is in the ground. And that includes my daughter. And that includes the baby. Yes, you can meet them. You will meet them. You will be the first person in Montana they meet after me." "Okay. Okay." She put down the scissors. She sat down on the dryer across from him, her feet dangling above the floor. They sat there for a minute in the cold basement laundry room, not speaking. The old house creaked around them. Upstairs, Nora Ashford slept through what would be, in the morning, the worst argument she and her daughter had ever had, and the proudest. Outside on the lawn, 11 members of the Iron Mountain Charter were quietly loading 4 zip-tied contract killers into a panel van for Sheriff Pritchard's deputies to find neatly and anonymously at a pull-off on Highway 93 at first light. Inside the laundry room, Drifter Holloway took the folded letter out of his pocket one more time. He looked at it. He put it back. He did not put it back in the inside pocket of his cut. He put it in his shirt pocket over his heart. He took out the burner phone. He scrolled to a number that he had kept in the phone unused for 10 years and 3 weeks. A number he had never dialed, a number that had been moving with him from burner to burner through 3 carriers and 17 different prepaid cards, the last unbroken thread between the man he had been and the man he had become. He hit the green button. Ren Ashford, 15 years old, sat very quietly on the top of the dryer and did not look at him. It rang 4 times. On the 5th ring, a woman's voice answered, soft and a little surprised, 300 miles in 10 years and 1 lifetime away. "Hello, Junie," Drifter said. And then he could not say anything else for a long minute, and he did not have to, because on the other end of the line, his daughter had begun quietly to cry, the way you cry when a door that has been locked for a long time opens, and you realize the other side of it was never empty. It was only waiting. Outside, the first gray light of Tuesday morning came up over the Bitterroots, clean and cold and new. At 3:47 on Tuesday morning, while the sky over Hamilton was still the color of wet slate, and the sodium lights in the underground parking structure of Ravalli Regional Medical Center were humming in that flat-tired way they hummed at the tail end of every night shift, Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood stepped out of the elevator on level B2 and walked toward his car. He was a tall man, 56 years old, silver at the temples, the kind of face that had been reassuring parents about their children's blood counts and surgical outcomes for 2.5 decades. He wore a charcoal overcoat over his scrubs. His wedding ring was a plain gold band, and he still wore it even though Claire Blackwood had taken the kids and moved to a condominium in Coeur d'Alene 11 months ago, and had stopped by mutual agreement, returning most of his calls. He was carrying a leather briefcase and a paper cup of lukewarm coffee from the cafeteria. He was looking at his phone. He was waiting for a single text message, 3 words long, that would confirm that a problem had been permanently resolved. He was, in other words, a man whose mind was elsewhere when he approached his silver Mercedes S-Class in the second-to-last row of level B2, and that was the first mistake of his morning. The second mistake was unlocking the car before he looked up. He hit the fob, the headlights flashed, the locks chunked. A hand came out of the shadow between his Mercedes and the concrete pillar on the driver's side, and that hand was attached to a forearm that was wrapped from wrist to elbow in a line of fresh black stitches under a strip of white medical tape. The hand closed on the front of Dr. Blackwood's coat and slammed him with a single clean motion backward into the side of his own car. The coffee cup hit the concrete. The briefcase hit the concrete. The phone hit the concrete screen down and a hairline crack spidered across its glass. Doctor, Blackwood could not speak. The impact had driven most of the air out of him. Drifter Holloway leaned in close enough that Blackwood could smell the cold rain on his leather cut and the faint antiseptic tang of whatever the stitches on his forearm had been cleaned with. He could not see the death's head on the back of Drifter's vest, but he could see the embroidered diamond patch on the front, the one with the numbers. He knew what that patch meant. Every man in Montana who dealt in the kind of business Blackwood dealt in knew what that patch meant. Blackwood's bladder almost but not quite let go. You, he whispered. Me. Your men were supposed to. My men are fine, Doctor. Your men are zip-tied in the back of a panel van on Highway 93. Sheriff's deputies are going to find them in about an hour. Nobody is dead, including, I notice, a certain 15-year-old girl and her mother. Blackwood's face did not change. Blackwood was above all a man whose face did not change. But the hand holding his phone was trembling, which was not a thing that usually happened to Blackwood's hands. Drifter saw it. Listen to me very carefully, Doctor. I am not here to kill you. If I were here to kill you, we would not be talking. I am here to deliver a message from the Iron Mountain Charter to you personally. And you are going to hear it, and you are going to nod, and then you are going to go home, and you are going to think very hard about whether you want to be the kind of man who understands a message the first time. What do you want? Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, you are going to walk into the federal building in Missoula, and you are going to ask for the agent in charge. You are going to surrender. You are going to confess fully to everything in that little black notebook. And you are going to plead guilty at arraignment to every single charge the United States Attorney offers you. There will be no trial. There will be no deposition. There will, above all, be no testimony taken from Wren Ashford or her mother. You are going to leave them out of your pleadings and out of your defense and out of your conversation entirely. You are going to eat the full 25 years, Doctor, and you are going to eat it quietly. That's not how. That is exactly how. You are going to do this because your organization is finished. Because Curtis Vane in Salt Lake City is going to receive at 6 a.m. a package of information he is not going to enjoy. Because the only way you live long enough to see the inside of a federal penitentiary is if your old friends in Silver Creek believe you kept your mouth shut about them. And the only way they believe that is if you plead out fast and clean and never say the Ashfords' names out loud. You understand? I understand. Say it again. I understand. Good. Now the second part. If any member of the Ashford family at any point in the rest of their natural lives has so much as a flat tire they cannot explain, the Iron Mountain Charter is going to assume it came from you. And you will find out from inside your federal cell that our reach inside that system is longer than yours ever was on the outside. Do you understand? I understand. Look at me when you say it, Doctor. Blackwood looked at him. For a second in the flat hum of the parking structure, there passed between them the kind of recognition that passes between two predators who have both had long careers. Blackwood saw in Drifter Holloway's eyes a man who was not threatening. Threats were for men who were not sure. Drifter Holloway was sure. Drifter Holloway had decided at some point in the last 72 hours that a 15-year-old girl in a flannel robe was going to live to be 80, and he had rearranged the rest of his life around that decision, and the mathematics of that were now simply the mathematics of Blackwood's mathematics. I understand, Dr. Blackwood said for the third time. Good. Drifter let go of the front of his coat. Blackwood slid very slowly down the side of his Mercedes until he was sitting on the cold concrete, one leg folded under him, his overcoat bunched around his shoulders. He looked for the first time in 26 years like exactly what he had always been, a small, afraid man in an expensive coat. Drifter picked up the phone off the ground. He looked at the cracked screen. He handed it to Blackwood. 9 a.m., he said. Missoula. Don't be late. He walked out of the parking structure. He did not look back. By 6 o'clock that same morning, the first tremors had started. A courier from the Iron Mountain Charter, a man Drifter trusted and Grizzly had vetted, delivered an encrypted thumb drive to a specific address in Salt Lake City. The thumb drive contained scanned pages of Wren Ashford's decoded ledger, a list of Silver Creek Syndicate middlemen compiled from 2 years of club surveillance, and a short unsigned note that read only the Iron Mountain Charter, considers the Ashford family of Stevensville, Montana, to be under its permanent protection. Any attempt on their lives will be understood as an attempt on the charter. Curtis Vane, in his 29th floor office, read the note at 6:14. He removed his small, round glasses. He polished them with his microfiber cloth. He put them back on. He made 3 phone calls in the next 20 minutes, and at the end of the 3rd phone call, the contract on the Ashford family had been, in the quiet language of his profession, retired. It had not been retired out of mercy. It had been retired because Curtis Vane was a businessman, and a contract that required killing a 15-year-old girl protected by a motorcycle club that had just demonstrated it knew the names of his middlemen was on the numbers bad for business. He did not, however, forgive it. Curtis Vane was not a man who forgave. He was a man who filed. At 9:02 that same morning, Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood walked into the Russell Smith Federal Building in Missoula, asked to speak to the special agent in charge, and surrendered. By noon, he had signed an initial statement. By Friday, he had signed a full confession. By the end of the following week, the United States Attorney for the District of Montana had filed a 78-count indictment, and Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood had accepted without argument a plea deal of 25 years in federal prison with no parole and no cooperation agreement beyond the documents he had already produced. He did not speak the name Ashford once during any of it. 8 months passed. The Bitterroot cycled through its seasons the way it always had. The cottonwoods along the river turned yellow and lost their leaves. The first snow came in early November. The Ashford farmhouse got a new front door heavier than the old one with 3 deadbolts that Nora did not strictly need and that Wren did not mind at all. Hammer's shoulder healed up mostly. He could lift a beer again, though he claimed loudly that he could not yet lift a wrench, and Grizzly allowed him to continue with this fiction for approximately 4 weeks before Grizzly put him back on the schedule at the repair shop the club ran in Corvallis. In July, Juniper Holloway, very pregnant, flew from Boston to Missoula with her husband, a quiet, soft-spoken accountant named Matthew, who was terrified of his father-in-law for approximately 9 minutes, and then not terrified of him at all. Drifter met them at the airport in his truck, not on his bike, because Juniper had asked him in one of their long, careful phone conversations whether he would mind. He had not minded. He had put the Harley in the shop and pulled out the old Ford F-15. Oh, he had not driven in 6 years, and he had picked up his daughter at baggage claim and had not, to his own surprise, fallen apart because his daughter had fallen into his arms first and had said into his shoulder, "Hi, Dad." And Drifter had discovered that the thing he had been afraid of for 10 years was not actually the thing that happened. They spent 3 days in Montana. On the 2nd day, Drifter drove Juniper and Matthew out to Stevensville to the Ashford farmhouse because Juniper had said she wanted to meet the girl, and Drifter had told her that the girl was the reason any of this was happening. Wren Ashford came out onto the porch with a book in her hand when the F-150 pulled up. She was 16 now. She had grown 2 inches in 8 months. She looked when she saw Juniper stepping down out of the truck with one hand under the curve of her belly, like a kid meeting someone she had heard stories about her whole life, which in a way she was. Juniper walked up the porch steps. She looked at Wren. She said, "You're the one who made him open the letter." And Wren said, "Yes, ma'am." And Juniper said, "Thank you." And then, because Juniper Holloway was her father's daughter in ways she had never quite accepted until she got pregnant, she opened her arms, and Wren Ashford, who had been raised by careful, practical people, and who did not, as a rule, hug strangers, stepped into them without hesitating. Drifter stood at the bottom of the porch steps and watched his daughter and the girl who had pulled his daughter back into his life hold each other in the thin July sun. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Matthew, the accountant, put a hand on Drifter's shoulder. It was a small hand. Drifter did not mind. The baby was born on August 17th, a girl 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and Juniper named her Wren Juniper Holloway. And she sent Drifter a picture from the hospital bed, and Drifter printed that picture and taped it to the inside of his locker at the Iron Mountain, where it stayed for the rest of the years he kept a locker there. Dallas Reeve's trial was set for the 2nd Tuesday in October. By rights, it should never have gone to trial. The evidence against Reeve was overwhelming. He had been caught in the house. He had fired a weapon at multiple witnesses. The 9mm had his prints, his DNA, and ballistic matches to a prior home invasion in Hamilton the year before. His court-appointed attorney, a weary public defender named Holcomb, had spent most of August begging him to plead out. Holcomb had a deal on the table, 15 years eligible for parole in 10. Reeve had refused. Reeve had refused because Reeve had received a visitor in the Ravalli County Jail in early September. The visitor had not signed in at the front desk. The visitor had come through the attorney-client room with a bar card and a fake name and had sat across from Reeve for 11 minutes and had told Reeve that his options were to plead out and spend the next decade wondering which meal would be his last, or take it to trial and demand that Ren Ashford take the stand in open court and explain in public in front of the press, in front of the cameras, that would inevitably follow a case like this exactly how she had cracked the ledger. The visitor had explained to Reeve that the first option ended with Reeve dying in prison of something the coroner would call natural causes. The second option ended with Ren Ashford becoming a public name, a face, a known quantity attached to a known address, whose identification as the decoder of the Silver Creek ledger would be picked up by every wire service in the country within 48 hours of her direct examination. And once that happened, the visitor had said Ren Ashford would become, for the rest of her life, a moving target for every organization that had ever done business with Silver Creek Syndicate. Not because anyone particularly wanted her dead, because she would represent to a certain kind of organization an uncomfortable precedent. The girl who saw, the girl who read, the girl who lived. Organizations like that did not like precedents. The visitor had said to Reeve that this was the gift Curtis Vane wished to give the Ashford family through him. The visitor had said that all Reeve had to do was take it to trial. Reeve, who was not a brave man and not an especially smart man, had agreed because Reeve understood two things very clearly. One, that pleading out meant dying in prison. Two, that dragging Ren Ashford into open court meant at minimum surviving long enough to see it happen. And so Dallas Reeve, against the emphatic advice of his own attorney, had demanded a jury trial. The district attorney for Ravalli County, a careful woman in her 50s named Ellen Marsh, had called Nora Ashford the day after Reeve's decision and had explained it to her in language that did not spare Nora anything. Nora had listened. Nora had hung up. Nora had gone into the living room where Ren was sitting on the floor by the wood stove working through a problem set for her Intro to Statistics course at Missoula College, the one she had been allowed to enroll in as a dual-credit junior, and Nora had sat down on the couch and had said, "Baby, we need to talk about something." Ren had listened. She had closed the textbook. She had thought about it. She had said, "I'll testify." Nora had said, "Honey." Ren had said, "Mom, if I go into witness protection, we lose the house. We lose your job. We lose Missoula College. We lose Drifter. We lose the charter. We lose everything we have, and we spend the rest of our lives being somebody else somewhere we don't know anyone. And we do all of that so that a man named Curtis Vane in Salt Lake City gets to decide what shape our life is. I'm not doing that. I'd rather go to court." Nora had said, "They will try to make you look like a liar on the stand." Ren had said, "Let them try me." Nora had looked at her daughter. She had thought about a lot of things. She had thought about a welder named Thomas Ashford and about the map of floorboards on butcher paper in the hall closet, and about a man who had told their 7-year-old daughter that the world was divided into people who went toward the sound and people who went away from it. Nora had said, "Okay, baby." And Nora had picked up the phone and called Ellen Marsh and had said, "My daughter will testify." The trial opened on October 14th, a Tuesday, in the Ravalli County Courthouse in Hamilton. The courtroom was on the second floor, a long, narrow room with tall windows and oak paneling from the 1920s and the kind of acoustics that made every cough sound like an accusation. The public gallery was packed. The local papers had been running pieces on the case for a month. A stringer from the Associated Press was in the second row with a notebook. Two producers from a true crime podcast had driven up from Boise. The first 3 rows on the prosecution's side were full of Nora's coworkers from Ravalli Regional, the ones who had stood by her through 8 months of suspicion and whispered rumors before Blackwood's indictment had finally made the whispers stop. Ren sat in the front row with her mother. She was wearing a plain navy blue dress and flat shoes. She was 16 years and 4 months old. Her hair was tied back. Her hands were folded in her lap. She did not look to the casual observer frightened. She looked the way she had always looked, watchful. Dallas Reeve was at the defendant's table in a borrowed gray suit that did not quite fit him. He had lost weight in jail. His court-appointed attorney Holcomb sat beside him with the expression of a man who had been ordered by his client to fly a plane into the side of a mountain. The judge was Carol Whitlock, a 62-year-old jurist who had been on the bench in Ravalli County for 19 years and had in that time developed approximately zero tolerance for theatrics. Opening statements began at 10:05. Ellen Marsh for the prosecution spoke for 11 minutes. She was concise and methodical and unimpressive, which was by design because Ellen Marsh was the kind of prosecutor who built her case on the witnesses and not on herself. She told the jury the facts. She promised them a ledger, a defendant with a gun, a set of shell casings, and a 15-year-old girl who had done something remarkable in a closet. Holcomb for the defense rose. Holcomb did not want to do what he was about to do. His client had forced him to do it. Holcomb had been a public defender for 23 years, and he had never in all that time felt the particular kind of sick he felt that morning. He began. Members of the jury, the prosecution is going to ask you to rely on the testimony of a single witness. A witness who was alone in a dark closet during a storm during a power outage in a state of extreme emotional distress. A witness who was 15 years old at the time. A witness whose memory of the events of that night is going to form the central pillar of the prosecution's case. And I am going to ask you to consider carefully whether the testimony of such a witness under such conditions can possibly be. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Holcomb did not stop speaking. He was a professional. You did not stop for doors, can possibly be the kind of evidence on which. The people in the gallery began to turn. It was a slow turn. It moved through the benches like a wave. It started at the back and moved forward. Holcomb stopped. He stopped because he could feel in the room that something had happened and that he needed to look at. He turned. Walking up the center aisle of the courtroom in a loose, unhurried, single-file column were 12 men. They were not wearing cuts. Judge Whitlock had issued a standing order at the start of the proceedings that no gang colors or insignia were to be displayed in the courtroom, and the Iron Mountain Charter, as Grizzly liked to say, respected the judiciary. They had left their cuts hanging on the backs of a dozen bar stools at the Iron Mountain Saloon. Instead, they wore dark suits. The suits were not new. The suits had been purchased collectively for a funeral in 2021, and they had been taken out of garment bags and pressed for this morning. They did not quite fit because the men inside them were men who had not been shaped by the kind of lives that produce well-fitting suits. The shoulders strained, the wrist showed a little too much cuff. Grizzly Vance's necktie was visibly crooked because Grizzly had not tied a necktie since 1987 and had given up halfway. But the tattoos showed, on the backs of hands, on the sides of necks, above collars and below cuffs, and the faces showed. They came up the aisle without a word. They did not look at the defendant's table. They did not look at the prosecution's table. They did not look at the judge. They looked as a single unit at the empty benches in the back 2 rows on the prosecution's side, and they filed in and sat down in synchronized silence. 12 men, 2 rows, back straight, hands folded. The last one to sit was Drifter Holloway. He was in the aisle seat of the 2nd row. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at the jury. He looked across the room at the back of Ren Ashford's head, and when Ren turned slightly and saw him there, he nodded once. A small, slow, deliberate nod. Ren nodded back. Judge Whitlock looked over the top of her glasses. "Counselor," she said dryly to Holcomb, "you had the floor." Holcomb cleared his throat. He tried to remember the next sentence of his opening statement. Behind him at the defendant's table, Dallas Reeve turned around in his chair. He turned around because he had felt the way animals feel. Something changed in the air behind him. He turned around and he looked at the back 2 rows of the gallery. He saw Grizzly Vance. Grizzly Vance was looking directly at him. Grizzly Vance's face was not doing anything in particular. It was simply a face pointed across the courtroom at Dallas Reeve's face. Reeve's own face lost its color in stages. It went from the unhealthy gray of a man who had been eating jail food for 8 months to something paler, a kind of damp chalk white, and then to something that was almost translucent, and his mouth opened and closed twice, and he turned around in his chair and grabbed the sleeve of Holcomb's jacket. Holcomb. Holcomb did not hear him. Holcomb was still trying to speak. Holcomb. "Mr. Reeve, I am addressing." Holcomb changed the plea. Holcomb stopped. He looked down at his client. He saw Reeve's face. "Mr. Reeve, we discussed." "Change the plea. Change it. Change it right now. Guilty. All counts. Everything. Change it." "Mr. Reeve, the prosecution's offer has expired, and even if..." "Tell the judge. Tell her right now. I'll take whatever they give me. 20 years. 30. I don't care. Just tell her." The courtroom had gone very quiet. Judge Whitlock leaned forward. She was not a woman who missed things. "Counselor," she said, "is there an issue?" Holcomb looked at the back of the room. He looked at the 12 men in dark suits in the last two rows. He looked at his client, who was not far from tears and whose right hand was shaking so hard it was rattling the water glass at his elbow. He looked at Ellen Marsh. He looked at the jury. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, defense requests a brief recess to confer with my client regarding a potential change of plea." Judge Whitlock did not move for a long second. She looked at the gallery. She looked at the defendant. She looked at the 12 men in the back two rows who were sitting, all of them, with the same unblinking composure. She was a woman who had been in this room for 19 years. She knew with great precision what she was looking at. She also knew with even greater precision that it was not her job to comment on it. 15 minutes, she said, and the jury will retire to the jury room. The gavel came down. It was in the 5th minute of that recess, while Dallas Reeve was sobbing into his hands at a small consultation table in a side room off the main courtroom, while Holcomb was on the phone with Ellen Marsh, trying to piece together a last-minute plea on the hoof, while the 12 men in the back two rows sat silently unmoving, the way they had sat coming in, that Wren Ashford stood up from her seat in the front row and walked quietly to the clerk's bench at the side of the room. She spoke to the clerk in a low voice. The clerk listened. The clerk raised an eyebrow. The clerk walked to the judge's chambers and knocked on the door. When Judge Whitlock returned to the bench, she was carrying a single sheet of paper. She sat down. She looked for a long moment at Wren. "Young lady," she said, "you wish to address the court?" "Yes, ma'am." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds, Your Honor, that before the defendant changes his plea and before anyone in this room leaves it, there is something I would like the jury to hear, not as a witness, just as a statement. It will take 4 minutes. I wrote it down." Ellen Marsh, who had been half a step behind the entire day, caught up. "Your Honor, the prosecution has no objection." Holcomb, still on the phone in the hallway, was not in a position to object. Judge Whitlock looked at Wren for a long time. She was a woman who had been raised a long time ago by a mother who had told her that the test of a good judge was not whether she followed the rules, but whether she recognized the moments when the rules had already been fulfilled and only the ceremony remained. "Bailiff," she said, "bring the jury back in." When the jury returned and Dallas Reeve was brought back blotchy-faced and trembling to the defendant's table, Judge Whitlock addressed the room. "This is an irregular moment," and she said, "but this is also an irregular case. Before we proceed with any change of plea, Miss Ashford, who is the victim witness of record, has asked to make a brief statement. She is not a witness in the technical sense at this moment. She is a minor who has been through an ordeal, and she has asked the court for 4 minutes. The court is going to grant her 4 minutes. Counsel, please note your positions for the record. Miss Ashford, you may come forward." Wren stood. She walked to the front of the courtroom. She did not walk to the witness stand. Judge Whitlock had not directed her there. She walked to the small open space between the prosecution's table and the jury box, and she turned to face the jury, and she took out of the pocket of her navy blue dress a single folded sheet of paper. She did not open it. She looked at the jury. Then she did something nobody in the courtroom had expected. She turned and she pointed, and she walked to the large green chalkboard on wheels that the court used for exhibits, the one that had been brought in that morning for use in later testimony about the ledger, and she picked up a piece of chalk. "Your Honor, may I use the board?" "You may." Wren began to write. She did not write words. She wrote columns of numbers. She wrote them quickly in small, neat figures from memory, lot codes, quantities, dates, initials. She filled the board from edge to edge in under 2 minutes without consulting a single note, without pausing. The jury watched. The prosecution watched. Ellen Marsh's co-worker at the second chair, a young assistant district attorney who had spent 6 weeks trying to master this material himself, sat with his mouth slightly open. In the back 2 rows, 12 men in ill-fitting dark suits watched a 15-year-old girl who was now 16 recreate from memory a piece of evidence that had taken 3 federal forensic accountants 160 man-hours to verify. Wren finished writing. She set down the chalk. She turned to the jury. She did not open her piece of paper. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said. Her voice was small, but it carried. "I am not going to read what I wrote down. I was going to. I wrote it this morning on my mom's kitchen table. It said that I wasn't scared and that I was a good witness and that you could trust what I remembered." but I don't think I need to read it anymore. She turned back to the board. This is the ledger, she said. You have heard it called the ledger. This is what was in the notebook that was in the lockbox that was under my mother's bed. The man who was paying Dallas Reeve to break into my house was named Thaddeus Blackwood. He already pled guilty, so you will not hear his name in this trial. But he did exist. He was a doctor at the hospital where my mother worked. He was running prescription pills out of that hospital, and he was using my mother's lot sheets to make his fake entries look real. And when my mother noticed, he sent Mr. Reeve to our house. Mr. Reeve came to take a quaderno from my mother. He came with a crowbar and with a gun. I hid in a closet. I called the wrong number. A man named Drifter answered it. In the back, 2 rows, one of the men moved very slightly and then went still again. I am telling you this, Wren said, because I do not want to be a secret anymore. The reason Mr. Reeve took this case to trial was not because he was innocent. It was because somebody told him that if he took it to trial, I would have to testify, and that when I testified, I would become a name that other people like Dr. Blackwood, would remember forever. The reason they wanted me to become a name is that they thought a name is easier to hurt than a girl in a closet. She turned to look at Dallas Reeve. Reeve could not look back. Mr. Reeve, she said, I am telling you here in front of the jury, in front of my mother, in front of the whole court, that you did not scare me into silence, and you are not going to scare me into silence, and the people who sent you are not going to scare me into silence. My name is Wren Ashford. I live at 4242 Pinecrest Road in Stevensville, Montana. My mother is Nora Ashford. We are not going into witness protection. We are not moving. We are not changing our names. We are going to stay in our house, and we are going to keep our phone numbers, and we are going to keep our lives. And if anybody ever comes for us again, they will find, as you did, that we are harder to take than we look. She turned back to the jury. I wanted you to hear that from me in my own voice before the plea, because I think it matters that you know that this ledger was not solved by a ghost. It was solved by a girl who was standing in front of you, and that girl is not afraid of this room. She looked at Judge Whitlock. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm done. She walked back to her seat. She sat down. Her mother took her hand and squeezed it once hard and did not let go. For a long second, nobody in the courtroom moved. Judge Whitlock cleared her throat. Counselor, she said to Holcomb, who had come back into the room during Wren's statement and had not sat down, I believe you had a motion. Dallas Reeve pled guilty to all counts 14 minutes later. The sentencing hearing was set for 6 weeks out. When sentencing came, the court gave him 15 years in the state penitentiary at Deer Lodge, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. He served 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days of that sentence before he was found one morning in his cell, dead of what the coroner ultimately ruled natural causes, although every corrections officer in that wing of Deer Lodge understood without anyone needing to say it, that the causes had been more natural to some men's careers than others. Curtis Vane, in his 29th floor office in Salt Lake City, read the notification and did nothing because by that point the Silver Creek Syndicate had been gutted by a 3-state federal task force whose central organizing evidence had been a 16-year-old girl's chalkboard demonstration in a courtroom in Hamilton, and Curtis Vane had bigger problems than Dallas Reeve. 5 years passed. Wren Ashford turned 21 on a cold, clear March morning in Missoula. She was a junior at the University of Montana, majoring in criminology with a minor in applied mathematics, and she was in her second year of an internship program with the Missoula field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, working under a supervisory special agent named Elena Moreau, who had been 5 years earlier one of the 3 federal forensic accountants who had spent 160 man-hours verifying Wren's decoded ledger. Agent Moreau had, during that verification, formed a private opinion about the girl who had done the original decoding. Agent Moreau had kept track of that girl. When that girl applied to the intern program, at 17, Agent Moreau had personally signed the recommendation. Wren's first case as an intern was a pattern analysis of pharmaceutical diversion in the Pacific Northwest, 3 states wide, covering a 2-year window. She was very good at it. On a Thursday afternoon in April, at the end of a long day in which she had cross-referenced 18 months of EOLOT numbers against a spreadsheet she had built herself, and found in under 4 hours an anomaly that 2 senior analysts had missed for 6 weeks, Wren Ashford's phone buzzed on her desk. It was an unknown number. She looked at it for a long moment. Her thumb hovered. Then she opened it. The message read, "Did you dial the wrong number this time? Ren Ashford, 21 years old, sitting at a gray government-issued desk in a federal building in Missoula, Montana, started to laugh. And then, because she was in a cubicle farm, had to cover her mouth with her hand. She typed back, "No." I knew exactly who I was messaging. 3 seconds later, "Good girl." Then, "Mail coming. Next week. Don't open it at work." She smiled at the screen. She put her phone down. She turned back to her monitor. At a kitchen table in a small, sunny house in a suburb of Boston, Silas Drifter Holloway, 53 years old, put his own phone down and went back to the drawing on the paper placemat in front of him, which he was working on with a red crayon under the close supervision of his 5-year-old granddaughter, Ren, who had very specific opinions about where the red went. "Pop, pop." "Yes, ma'am." "You colored out of the line." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm going to have to fix it." "Yes, ma'am." Juniper from the kitchen, where she was making a pot of coffee for the sister-in-law who was about to come over for a visit, smiled without turning around. The package arrived at Ren Ashford's apartment in Missoula on the following Wednesday. It was a small, padded envelope, no return address, postmarked from Boston. Inside, wrapped in a square of black felt, was a simple bracelet. It was made of heavy woven leather, the kind used in saddle tack, and it had a single small silver disc at the closure. The disc was plain on the outside. On the inside, engraved in very small letters, were the words "Iron Mountain, property of no man." With the bracelet was a folded piece of paper. Kid. Closet doors, canola oil, chalkboards, federal buildings. You keep doing this your own way, the way you've been doing it since that Thursday night. I'm not going to tell you I'm proud of you, because pride is a father's word and I didn't earn it. I will tell you that my granddaughter is named after you. I will tell you that every one of us in the back 2 rows of that courtroom thinks about you. I will tell you that if you ever need us, you still have the number. I will tell you that the girl in the closet grew up to be the one opening the closets. I am glad I was on the other end of the wrong number. Drifter Ren Ashford stood in her kitchen in Missoula with the letter in one hand and the bracelet in the other. And she cried briefly and silently, the way she had learned to cry a long time ago, from a father who had built bridges. Then she put the bracelet on. She went to her small balcony. She looked out over the valley. It was a clear April evening. In the distance, somewhere west toward Highway 93, she heard very faintly the sound of a Harley-Davidson opening up on a straight stretch of road. It was not a sound meant for her. It was just a sound, an old, low, throaty sound carrying across the Bitterroot on the wind. She listened until it faded. Then she went back inside and she sat down at her kitchen table and she opened her laptop and she went back to work. On a Thursday night in April, in a storm, in a closet in a house at the end of a dirt road in Montana, a 15-year-old girl dialed a single wrong digit. She dialed it because she was scared. She dialed it because she was trying to reach her brother. She did not reach her brother. She reached a stranger in a leather cut in a bar 30 miles away on the day that stranger's daughter turned 25, and the stranger, because of the day, and because of the girl, and because of the voice his life had been training him to hear for 10 years without knowing, it did not delete the message. He read it. He stood up. He gathered his brothers. He rode through the storm. He kicked down a door. "The world is divided," Thomas Ashford had once told his daughter, "into people who go toward the sound and people who go away from it." The true test, he had said, was what you chose to face. The girl in the closet faced the door. The man on the burner phone faced the road. The 11 men behind him faced the storm. The doctor in the parking structure faced the truth eventually at the end of a stitched forearm and a quiet voice. And in a courtroom in Hamilton 8 months later, a 16-year-old girl walked to a chalkboard and faced a jury and told them with chalk dust on her fingers that a name is not a thing to be afraid of. A name is a thing to be spoken. In your own voice, in a room full of strangers, while the people who love you sit quietly behind you in 2 rows in dark suits that don't quite fit and wait for you to finish. Sometimes the guardian angel does not wear a white robe. Sometimes he wears black leather and carries the storm on his shoulders. Sometimes he is a stranger at the other end of a wrong number. Sometimes he is a man who has been waiting without knowing it for 10 years for a door to open. And sometimes the girl in the closet grows up. Sometimes she becomes the one who opens the closets for other girls. Sometimes the wrong number turns out to be the right one. Sometimes in the middle of a storm, the universe dials for you.